All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something pretty crucial, especially if you're thinking about those UPSC exams.
Oh, absolutely. This one's a biggie,
Yeah, we're talking to the Siliguri corridor.
or as it's sometimes called, the chicken's neck.
Yeah, that nickname, it definitely makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does capture that sense of vulnerability.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack why this, well, frankly, quite small strip of land
Mm.
is so massively important for India.
I mean, just picture it. The entire Northeast region hanging on to the rest of the country by this thread, a corridor that's, get this, just 22 kilometers wide at its thinnest point.
22 kilometers. That's what, like barely the length of a decent bike ride.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? We're talking about a major geopolitical pressure point here.
A pressure point. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Before we get into the why, though, maybe we should just get the geography clear. Where exactly is this chicken's neck located?
So picture the map of India, right? We're talking about West Bengal, that northeastern part.
Okay, got it. West Bengal.
The Siliguri corridor acts as a bridge between the 7 northeastern states, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, all those, and the rest of India.
Right, right. So it's the link.
Exactly. And it's squeezed in between Nepal to the west, Bhutan up north, and Bangladesh to the south.
Squeezed is right. I mean, it's like geographically speaking, you couldn't get a more precarious position, could you?
It really highlights the strategic importance, that's for sure.
Okay, so we've got this narrow passage, vital for connecting a whole region, and it's surrounded. I can already see why it's, well, kind of make or break point for India, but let's break it down even further. Why is this corridor so crucial, especially for national security?
Well, just imagine if this corridor, this lifeline, were to be compromised in some way,
Okay, compromised how?
like militarily. Yeah, it could be military action, but even a natural disaster, anything that disrupts that flow, it could sever the connection to the entire Northeast. Supplies, troops, communication, everything.
Oh, wow. So we're not just talking about inconvenience here. We're talking potential chaos.
Exactly. The potential for vulnerability is immense. And this isn't just theoretical.
Oh, right. Like, historically speaking, haven't there been some close calls?
Absolutely. Back in '62, during the Sino-Indian War, the Chinese army came dangerously close to actually cutting off the Siliguri corridor.
The Sino-Indian War, oh, yeah. That was a pivotal moment, wasn't it?
It was a wake-up call for India.
Definitely, you don't want to come that close to losing such a vital link and not learn from it.
Exactly. It really solidified the corridor's strategic importance. And you have to remember the context.
Oh, you mean the whole proximity to China?
Precisely. The fact that it's so close to China, especially the Tibet Autonomous Region, well, it adds a whole other dimension to India's security concerns.
So it's like, just by existing, this corridor is already a factor in India's relationship with China.
You could say that it's a constant consideration. It's like this unspoken tension just looming.
Wow. Okay, so the chicken's neck, this pressure point, it's not just about connecting a region. It's tied to international relations, China. I mean, this is getting heavy.
It is complex, that's for sure. But it's not all doom and gloom. The Siliguri corridor has immense potential too.
Okay, hold on. Potential. We've talked about vulnerability, we've talked about the chicken's neck and China, but what kind of potential are we talking about here?
Well, think about it. The Siliguri corridor is an economic artery. It's the main route for everything: goods, resources, people moving between the Northeast and the rest of India.
Ah, right. So it's not just strategic, it's economic too. Disrupt that flow, and you've got major problems on your hands.
Exactly. It's the lifeblood of the region, economically speaking. We're talking trade routes, energy pipelines, tourism, you name it. And it goes beyond just India's internal stuff.
Oh, right. It plays a role in that Act East policy, doesn't it?
Exactly. India's looking to strengthen ties with Southeast Asia, right? Economically, strategically, the whole package.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
And guess what? The Siliguri corridor. It's the most direct land route to those Southeast Asian nations.
So it's not just about what's flowing within India, it's about India's connection to the whole region. Okay, things are getting really interesting now. We're talking national security, economics, international relations, all because of this one little corridor. You can see why you said it was a big one for the UPSC folks.
Oh, absolutely. And we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to uncover.
All right, you've definitely piqued our curiosity. Let's dive into those layers then. What else do we need to know about the challenges and the opportunities that this chicken's neck throws up?
So we know the Siliguri corridor is this vital link, right? For the Northeast, for the Act East policy. I mean, it's a big deal for India. But with that importance comes a whole set of, well, vulnerabilities. It's not just that it's narrow, it's a whole bunch of issues that could really mess things up.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We talked about the strategic stuff, the economics, but what are these challenges that make it so, I don't know, fragile?
Well, just think about where it is, geographically speaking. This region, it's prone to all sorts of natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, landslides, you name it. And any one of those could just cripple the infrastructure, like that awful flood a few years back.
The one that like submerged parts of the corridor? I remember seeing pictures. It was crazy.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Even without any, external threats, the corridor is vulnerable. And then, of course, there are the human-made challenges.
Oh, right. Like what? Terrorism, that sort of thing.
Yeah, terrorism, cross-border stuff, illegal immigration, smuggling, especially from Bangladesh. It all adds another layer of complexity.
It's like you need to be constantly on guard,
Yeah.
managing all these risks while keeping this crucial economic flow going. It must be a real balancing act for India.
You're telling me ignoring these challenges, that's just not an option for India. And they haven't. The government's actually been working on a whole bunch of initiatives to, well, basically bolster the Siliguri corridor, make it more resilient.
Now, this is what I'm talking about. Give us the rundown. I'm sure our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC, want to hear about these initiatives.
Right. Okay. So one of the biggest ones is the Paratmala Pariyana project.
Paratmala Pariyama, that rings a bell.
It's a massive undertaking focused on developing like really strong road and highway networks. And that includes the Northeast, of course. So better infrastructure means better connectivity, smoother transportation, and, well, faster response times if, something bad happens.
Makes sense. So upgrading roads and highways, that helps ease the pressure on the chicken's neck a bit, right?
Yeah.
It makes it less vulnerable to disruptions. What else?
Okay, so another crucial initiative is these integrated checkposts, or ICPs for short. They're being set up along the borders with Nepal and Bangladesh.
ICPs. Okay, and what do they do?
They streamline trade and movement, but also enhance security. Think of them like one-stop shops for customs, immigration, all those checks. It makes the whole process smoother, but also more secure.
So instead of having like a bunch of scattered checkpoints, you have these centralized modern ICPs. Smart move, helps manage the flow of goods and people, but also keeps things tighter on the security front.
Exactly. And then there's the Act East policy we talked about earlier. It's not just about, being friendly with Southeast Asia. It's about actually investing in infrastructure projects to improve connectivity, roads, rail networks, ports, even pipelines.
So the Act East policy directly impacts the corridor. It's not just some foreign policy thing happening in a vacuum. It has real tangible effects on the ground.
Absolutely. These initiatives, the Paratmala, the ICPs, the Act East stuff, it all comes together to show how India is approaching the Siliguri corridor strategically.
It's a multi-pronged approach, right? Tackling infrastructure, security, regional integration, all at the same time. It's like mitigating those vulnerabilities we talked about while also, trying to unlock the corridor's potential. But with all this focus on, roads and connectivity, what about the people actually protecting this area, the actual security forces on the ground?
That's a great question. And it brings us to a crucial player, the Sashastra Seema Bal, or SSB.
The SSB. Yeah, Amit Shah, the Home Minister, I think I remember reading something about him emphasizing their importance, something about new infrastructure projects for the SSB.
You got it. That's a really important detail, especially for the UPSC folks. It shows the government's commitment to, strengthening the SSB's presence in this area. They're essentially India's first line of defense when it comes to the Siliguri corridor.
Okay, so for those who might not know, what exactly does the SSB do?
So they're one of India's central armed police forces, right? And they're mainly responsible for guarding the borders with Nepal and Bhutan.
Which, of course, flank the Siliguri corridor.
Exactly. Their job, it's pretty multifaceted. They're not just standing around. They're actively working to prevent all sorts of things, intrusions, smuggling, trafficking, you name it. They're also countering any potential terrorist activities.
Wow, so they're dealing with a lot. Smugglers, insurgents, even potential terrorists. That's a heavy responsibility, especially given the terrain and, how porous those borders can be.
It is, and their role becomes even more crucial when you remember just how important the corridor is strategically. Any disruption there, it has huge implications for India.
They're like guarding the jugular vein of India's northeast, it seems.
Yeah, pretty much. The SSB's success, it's directly tied to the stability of the whole region.
Okay, so we've talked about the geographic challenges, the infrastructure improvements, the security forces, the SSB. I feel like we're starting to get a good grasp of this situation, but I think it's time to, like, zoom out a bit, look at the bigger picture.
You're right. It's not just about memorizing facts and figures, right? It's about understanding the bigger forces at play here. Geopolitics, economics, security, it all comes together in this one spot.
Exactly. How does the Siliguri corridor fit into India's overall strategy? How does it affect its relationships with its neighbors? What does the future hold for this, well, vital but vulnerable passage? All right, so we've got through a lot, haven't we? Historical stuff, infrastructure, the SSB. It's clear this Siliguri corridor, it's a pretty big deal for India. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole scoop of it. It's like this small piece of land is at the center of so much.
You've got it. The Siliguri corridor, it really is a microcosm of India's, well, geopolitical realities.
Mm.
Where it's located, the vulnerabilities, the potential, it all plays into India's relationships with its neighbors, and it shapes its strategic outlook.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. We've talked about China, of course, but what about the other countries nearby? Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh?
Yeah.
How does the Siliguri corridor affect those relationships?
Well, think about it. The corridor is right there, in between them, so close cooperation is essential, especially with Nepal and Bhutan, right? India needs their goodwill, their cooperation for everything. Border security, trade, transit, you name it. Any kind of instability or tension there, it could directly impact the corridor.
So keeping things smooth with Nepal and Bhutan. It's not just about being friendly neighbors. It's about keeping that link to the Northeast alive. Like, their cooperation is essential for the chicken's neck to even function.
Exactly. And then you've got Bangladesh. Remember all those security challenges we talked about, the smuggling, the illegal immigration? Well, managing all of that effectively, it requires a good working relationship with Bangladesh. India needs them on board to secure the border, prevent any spillover of, instability into the corridor.
It sounds like India's got a delicate balancing act to manage here. Its own interests, the sensitivities of its neighbors, all while keeping this corridor secure. No room for error.
You could say that. And don't forget the economic aspect. The Siliguri corridor, it's not just about moving things within India. It's about India's economic goals in Southeast Asia, remember? The Act East policy. Well, a big part of that depends on the Siliguri corridor being this gateway for trade and investment.
Oh, right. We talked about that. India wants to be a major player in the region, and to do that, it needs this corridor to be stable and secure. Otherwise, those ambitions, they could be in trouble.
Exactly. The success of the Act East policy, it's directly tied to the stability of the Siliguri corridor.
Wow, okay, I'm really starting to see the bigger picture now. The Siliguri corridor, it's not just a piece of land, it's a symbol of India's position in the region. Its security, its development, all of it. It's connected to India's relationships with its neighbors, its economic goals, its place in the world.
You got it. And for anyone prepping for the UPSC, understanding all of this, the nuances, the complexities, it's crucial. It's not about memorizing facts. It's about understanding the big picture, the interplay of geopolitics, security, economics, all in this one place.
All right, listeners, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Siliguri corridor, I want you to take a moment to think about everything we've discussed, the vulnerabilities, the opportunities, the challenges, the strategic implications. What are your key takeaways?
This is really just the starting point. We encourage you to go deeper, do your own research, connect the dots. The Siliguri corridor, it's a dynamic region, always changing. Staying informed is key for anyone interested in India's future, its role in the world.
A huge thank you to expert speaker for their incredible insights and for walking us through this complex landscape. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners have as well.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, if you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this episode, and share it with your friends, especially those who are on their own UPSC journey. Your support helps us keep making great content.
And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.